Oh, it's still there. Okay, it's gone. Okay, so of the things we talked about putting the button down here,
Yep.
doing that to create
Nice.
input. So if you went up here, yeah, it's ordered, whatever. And then you can close it like that. We can change that if you guys don't like how that's being done. And the other things we talked about. These are arrows now. We can discuss changing the colors. So I don't know if those colors work anymore. But,
So one thing to consider just in general, so open it up. But yeah, so there is a thing called 508 compliance, which is an ADA regulation that's used for persons with disability to be able to better use applications. The requirements are only applied to or enforced with organizations that have government contracts. So in our case, we have to deal with this a little bit because schools. But in many cases, you can get away with not having to do it, and generally, especially in your first rounds of things, you don't worry about it. One of the things in there, though, so part of it is tagging things and saying, like, on each image what it actually is, because I can't read the image, so you need to tell them some other way. Like, imagine if you're blind, right? You don't know that that's a heart image, so you'd want to say, like, heart image or something, so we have some concept of. But what you have going on with the green, red, yellow, green and red, in particular, people who are colorblind, like it just doesn't have enough. It doesn't really matter. And green and red are good because they mean go and stop and like we danger and good and all that stuff that we normally use them for. You just have to have a second indicator. So you do because you have the up arrow and the down arrow, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's an aside, but it's something that you're going to come across in your career, so it's worth noting quickly. But yeah, no, that's great.
Okay. Yeah, but we can still discuss. I don't know if green and red now fits into the whole scheme, but that's. I was just showing you guys like that square.
How are you? Are you coloring them? How did you do the color for the arrows?
The arrows.
Like what's the code?
I set the options to like success and danger.
Okay, so you set color.
Yeah, sliding options. Somewhere here. Yeah. Danger.
Great. Okay, I was just making sure you were using the normal stuff and not.
Success.
Yeah. So, and if you want to change your base themes.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
If you go to your stencil project. Yep, and then the global. It's this, yeah. And app CSS. Okay, if you scroll down, they didn't. Okay, you can click on that link and it'll take you to what it looks like for colors. If you scroll down, so you can like choose different colors there. But if you copy and paste this, your primary color will change. So like your primary color information. So if you just copy this root and that'll leave it where it is, and then we'll make a modification. So you can see. You need that colon too.
All of it?
Yep, all of it. Yeah, just copy all of it. Yeah, just put it at the bottom. Alright, so now if we go up and we change primary, so just for the moment, change the primary color to black. Just write the word black. Make RGB be 000. Yep, and then your contrast is white. That's what the FFF and the 255, 255, 255 are. And then there's some shading. But if you go back and reload your app, all your blue stuff should be black. Yeah. Yeah. Does that make sense? And you can make as many colors as you want. So you can make your own colors. So if you go back to the CSS, so if you copied like all of the secondary section, or the primary, either one, and create, like just paste it somewhere, and then just change secondary to be like blue. Then you can use the color blue anywhere that you want. Does that make sense? And the contrast is about the color of, so like if you have a black button, what contrast color do you want to use for the icon or the words? So like white, usually, right?
Yeah.
But it could be yellow or whatever. Does that make sense? So your contrast is the contrast. Yeah. You need to make it like a brown or something.
But then you have to make the RGB too. Do they have to match?
You probably want them to match because they probably use RGB sometimes and they use the hex code sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah.
Yeah. But you can go figure. That's where, if you go back to the theming website that we were looking at, scroll to the top of this. So like you can just change, like you can change primary. Just click on the drop down. Yeah, just put something in there. Here, is that popping up? Yeah, just choose something over here.
Oh, wow.
And then it should have changed, so it'll now tell you if you scroll down.
Yeah,
the primary is changed. So like if you need that information, you just come in and figure it out.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So anyway.
Thank you.
Alright, so let's... Alright, so we're just going to walk through the CRUD list that we made on Friday again. You guys are like in the midst of this now, so this might make a little more sense. Tony is on a call with somebody. He's going to call in as soon as, but thank you. Yeah, he's going to call as soon as he can come in.
How are you?
Same old, how are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, what have you been working on over there, Ted?
So Tucker has been doing some UX boards and just Zapier stuff. On my own time, I'm doodling around, like, I made some sort of, there's like some math problem and stuff, so I figured out how to use Ruby to like write into a CSV and just now do it in the formatting. And then I built something like where I could draw shapes like to get a window. So I made a comic with it.
Nice, nice. Using Canvas?
No, I just found Ruby 2D.
Oh, it's a Ruby thing. Okay, yeah. All right, so let's walk back through this. As you have questions, we are just reviewing something we've seen before, so speak up, especially if they relate to things that you're doing, that you're working on currently. So let's see here. So we have our poorly named component we start with.
Are you going to record this?
It is recording, yeah, we got Tony, so there's Tony.
So we don't have to change this for the
Nice.
What's that? Oh, the trophies.
So we need to change
That's sweet. All right, Tony, you didn't miss anything. We're just getting started. Daniel showed a little bit about the modifications that he made, but we are just going to review what we did on Friday, really. Make sure everybody understands how this stuff works, what we're doing. All right, so we have our basic to-do list, and we should actually be able to create things. And we can click on them, and they can go away. It's fun. All right. So let's just walk through what's happening here. So if we, as we can see, first of all, going back is just, does it matter what the name of our folder is?
No.
Does it matter what the name of our file is?
No.
Does it matter what the name of our class is?
No.
Does it matter what the name of our tag is?
Yes.
Yes. And so if we look, for example, at our app root, which is where we define our navigation, we see that we have an ion route slash and the name of our component, which is the same name as the tag that we use inside of that component. Right? So if we go to route slash, what's going to happen?
It's going to load up the app to-do list.
Yep, it's going to load the app to-do list component. It actually puts it onto the page, and then it's going to load it. So it goes and searches through all the files that we have available and says, hey, there's a component that has that tag. I'm going to load that in. All right. So let's try to do this. So Ashlyn, where should I, if it loads up my component, what's the first piece of code that it's actually going to execute here? So that is true, yeah. It's going to do the component will load, which is the lifecycle hook. So before it actually renders anything, we're going to do a component will load. It says, hey, I've got my component on the page. Now before you actually call the render function, do something. So what is this line of code doing?
It's getting with the index.
Yep.
Of the board with ID.
Yep, so it's hitting the index method in our Rails controller, which is our items controller, which is going to ask for it to do an item.where board ID is 1. So it's going to give us back. So what are we going to get back then?
All the information of the board.
So close. So we're going to get back all of the items, all the information for all the items where the board ID is 1. Yeah. And then we're going to set this dot items equal to item data. What's going to happen at that point?
It's going to cause a re-render.
It's going to cause a re-render.
Even though it's already coming.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right. I think it actually delays it in this case because it's still in the component will load function, but yeah, it would otherwise cause a re-render because items is decorated with state, which calls the render function. And then on line 16, what is this doing?
That's updating the task name of item 2.
Item 2. So this, yeah. So the second item or the third item in our array, we're going to change its task name to be vanilla sky, right? Because 0 index is 0, 1, 2, the item at position 2, which is the third position. We're going to change this task name to be vanilla sky, and then we're going to update which item?
The first item.
The first item. So this is kind of a silly example, but okay. So update gets called. So where do we go from here?
Your update function.
Update function. So we can here. All right. So what does this line do?
We're going to find the object that has. Oh, find it where? Yeah, it's going to find the object where the ID is item.
Yep. And then just in line 52 is
You're giving the index of the item that you just found.
Yep. So yep. So given what we've done so far, so we called update with item 0. What is the index that we're going to get back?
0.
You see that?
Yeah.
Because yeah, because we're calling it. It's a silly example, but we're calling it with item 0, and so we go and look for in the items array which one has an ID of item 0. Well, that's the first one, and then we go find that object in the array. So what it's going to give us back is the index of where that item is in the array, which is 0. We know because that's what it
I mean, I guess like if you had deleted stuff from your page before, then it might give you a different ID. But pretty much.
That's right. It could have changed if we had done other things, but we didn't yet. So, all right. And then, what is line 53 doing, Justin?
It is setting the variable response equal to your product update index.
Which is going to be what? What are we getting in the response here?
It's going to be the item that you were updating, that you're changing.
Yeah.
And then it'll be an object of that item.
That's right. And Evan, what's this one doing?
You are creating a copy of its items so that you can save it
Yeah, basically. So we're creating a copy. That's all this is doing. It's just a copy of items. It dereferences it, is the technical language. And the reason why we're doing that is when we go to make a change later to the array, basically we're going to update the copy, and then we're going to set items equal to the copy. If we didn't do this dereferencing, the state decorator wouldn't recognize the change that happened, and so it wouldn't re-render the page. So we need a copy, a dereferenced copy, so that we can make the change actually happen. So line 55 does what, Evan?
So your index is 0. So
Mhm.
you're changing. You're setting. Okay, so you're setting the first item in your copy equal to the response.
That's right. So we're updating the one that we were trying to update in our actual array, and then Ashlyn, what's line 56 do?
It's just referencing the
Yeah.
items to the copy.
That's right. So now we have the items are going to be the updated copy, which now has the newly updated item as its first position. Great. All of that is true. All right. So we finish here. We finished all that. So now we're on line 18. So now what's going to happen? Something's going to happen there just because of the nature of how stencil works, right? So when we came in, we loaded the component. The first thing that happened, as Ashton says, we call component will load. And we do all of that. And then what's the next function that gets called? Render. Yeah. So then we come here. This dot items is undefined. Return. So don't show anything. Otherwise, we're going to return a header that has to do. And then content that has a card in it. In the card content, we're going to render each of the items, right? So we're going to call render items. So we'll go look at that. Well, and then just quickly to go through. And then we're going to put an item underneath of that that's going to be our little input and the save button. Okay. All right, so if we go to render items here, so Daniel, what's this do?
It maps basically each of your objects in the array to an actual app item that will be returned.
Mm-hmm. So what is this?
App item is one of the components.
Mm-hmm. How do you know that?
Because it's app dash item, which means it's a component that you have.
Yeah.
Or it could have been an ionic component.
Or it could have been an ionic component, or it could have been HTML. Right. So like knowing what's yours is a little difficult, right? There are some ways that you can distinguish. So here we're using app as a prefix, and that kind of is a clue to us that this is something that we built, but it wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, and all ionic components have to have a dash.
And all the essential components have to have a dash. Yeah, that's it. That's correct.
Do any HTML components have a dash?
Trying to think. It seems like there should be some, but I actually can't think of any. So
I'm trying to think of an HL component.
yeah.
Yeah. I think they need that too.
Yeah, it just seems strange though, because so like in Angular, you also create components, and in React you do as well, and it doesn't have that requirement of the dash. I don't actually know why they made that requirement a thing. It's probably something that will go away eventually, but I can't think of any.
Wait, did you, this is like a thing, did you personally learn Angular first?
I learned JavaScript first, and then jQuery, and then Angular, and then Steps. Well, then React and Stencil. But, and that's just because that's how technologies were evolving as I was getting older. Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of any. There totally could be, but I can't think of any. All right, so we call our render items. This is going to call our app item. So we now need to go look for what? Do we need to go look for a file named app item? Or a tag named app item, right? So like even here we have this, it's just poorly named, but it's called app list. We really should have named it app item, but we don't have to. The class is named app item as it should be, but again, it's convention, it doesn't need to be. But the tag here is app item, which is what clues us into, okay, this is what's going to happen. So on each iteration of our map, we're going to pass in a property, which is an item, and we're going to pass an index. And so when we get here and we load that item, what's the first thing that's going to happen? We call render, right? So render is going to have an ion item, one click, and then it's going to print out the label of the task name. And when we click on it, what's going to happen, Ashley?
It's gonna emit. It's gonna go to update
Yep.
version, so it'll emit the index.
Yep, it's going to emit this object up, right? So where can we look for what's going to happen when this gets emitted?
Return.
The parent, yep. So if we come back here, and what are we looking for?
Listen.
A listen, yep, for this update item, which is just based on the name that we've given to our event here. Okay. All right, so when we get to this point, we are going to call this function. Does it matter what the name of this function is? No, it doesn't matter. It's decorating the function, so it's going to listen, and whenever we hear an event for update item, we're going to call whatever function is decorated there, which just means whichever one comes after the listen. Yep.
Yeah. So, for example, create is async. Does that mean anything in terms of like when I use create? Does that mean like that means I can use like an await on create?
Yeah, it does, but it also if you use an await inside of a function,
yeah, I know
you have to put an async on the function.
But that also equally helps you know that when you call create, you can do an await at the same time, and then do the whole same thing, and wherever that's been called, you do the async.
Yeah, in fact, you see here that it says promise return from create is ignored. What that's telling you is that you should put in await, and then that warning goes away.
Or a dot then.
Or a dot then. Yep. It's just saying that you're ignoring what. Right, so this is it's just older syntax. That's how we used to do it. The reason why we prefer await is that it's more readable. So when you do await, it says, okay, wait till this thing's done, and then do line 24, and then do line 25. If you do dot then, okay, it then goes, okay, run create, which is like start the promise off, but then immediately do 24 and 25, and then potentially later when the request resolves, when the promise finishes, we're going to come back in here and we're going to execute this function. Okay, so it's a less readable and a little confusing because you think maybe that you're waiting for this to finish, but you're not. The way that you would have had to write this previously, if you wanted to do the same thing as when we do the await, is you would have had to write it like this. Does that make sense? Alright, so those are equivalents, but anyway, back to... Alright, so we called the update item, and then we're going to actually update whatever the index is that we're passing up, which is the same index that we passed down, so it's wherever the position of the item is. Yeah, line for this one, right?
50.
Line 50.
Oh,
no, because we called it from this, right, because this is emitting. Yeah. Yep. But to be fair, though, this is poorly written code. Like, we have updates in multiple places that are happening, and it's a little strange. All right, so so then we can update the index of the list item to be whatever the new value is, and then again we update all the items that we rendered to start it.
Is there any reason that you have to have async with that listening function?
Nope. Because we don't call an await anywhere inside of it. So. All right. So that's the basics of what's going on there. Let's take a look at our Let's take a look at our item HTTP service and then follow that back up. That'll help us to talk a little bit about inheritance. It'll also get us into like how we're making our API requests. So if I go into item HTTP service, it's very simple. It just has export class, item HTTP service, extends, CRUD HTTP service, has a constructor, and it has super items. Okay. What is the purpose of a constructor?
It's called every time you create an instance of the class.
It's called every time you create an instance of the class. So where are we, so everyone, let's look at this. Where are we creating a new instance of item HTTP service?
Anytime you write new
You're not having day.
Oh, sorry. I didn't.
Yes.
It's okay. And is it every time you call create? I have no idea.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's whenever you do new.
Okay.
So whenever you do new and you call the class, and you see the class even has parameters like a function.
Yeah.
This here, this combination, new space, the name of the class and the function, is calling the constructor function.
Okay.
Okay. So I know the names are weird, but that's like a thing you have to like just learn and memorize. When you say new item HTTP service, which is creating a new instance, as Daniel said, new instance to one of these things, it's calling the constructor function.
Okay.
Okay, so this right here is calling
The constructor.
the constructor. So the constructor can have parameters.
Mhm.
We'll get into what super is in just a second, but we could do something like that. And the way that you would do that is you put whatever parameters are here. Okay, so it's just like any other function that you're calling. The names are just weird. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. You're not yelling at, see, now it's even yelling at us because it expected to have an argument. It doesn't have. Okay, so put that back. Right, so in our case, items HTTP service doesn't require any arguments, but it's going to call the constructor. So we're going to call our constructor, and inside of there we have this code super and then items. What is super? Yeah, go on.
Is it supersedes or?
It's not too far off. Okay, let's look at this. So we have export. So there's not very much going on in here, so we might be able to figure it out from context. Export class item HTTP service extends CRUD HTTP service.
Yeah.
So if we're going to call a super, and we haven't created a super anywhere, what is that super referencing, you think?
What it extends from.
What it extends from? It's parent. So that's really what you're thinking. When you say super, and this is in lots of languages, what you're really doing is say, call my parent's constructor. Okay. So super is saying call my parent's constructor, which in this case is CRUD HTTP services constructor. That one does have a parameter of API URL. So in our case, we're calling the parent constructor with items as our API URL. So so this .url is going to be what? So let's go back through there. So here we're on this line. We're going to create a new instance. So we're calling this part. Ignore the create for the moment. So new item HTTP service.
Yep.
Right? Call that. That's going to call our constructor.
Yep.
Constructor is going to call super. Super is going to call our CRUD HTTP services constructor with the parameter of items.
Okay.
The constructor takes a parameter of API URL, which was items. So our URL is going to be
2000/items.
yeah, 3000/items. You see that?
Is there a reason that you have to have the intermediary class?
So the reason I have the intermediary class is that you can do some useful things. In this case, the way that we're using them, it's so simple that you probably don't. You could just call new CRUD HTTP service with items as the parameter. And that would be fine. The reason is it just is a little bit more readable to say, because it's very consistent with the way that we do it in Rails, and it's also the case that what extensions do is they allow you to override the base functionality. So what happens is in our item HTTP service, we have this constructor, which is really just calling its parents constructor, but technically it also has all of this code. So you can imagine that all of that code has been copy and pasted here.
Yeah.
And in fact, we could even do this and we would get the same result. Okay?
Question.
Yep.
So can you do like after, for example, this is like a weird example, but after line 5,
Mm-hmm.
could you do like this dot URL like plus equals, or like this dot URL equals this dot URL plus, like, let's say 1.
Yep.
So you're only working on ID 1.
Yep.
For example.
Yep.
So like it's almost okay.
Mm-hmm. And that's the big thing with extensibility and inheritance, is that in general, I want my other classes to use this code as it exists. So I don't have to do very much in terms of setup to be able to connect to my API. But there are certain circumstances where maybe I need to add some additional functionality or make some modifications. Like maybe I only want to ever interact with the thing that has an ID of 1. So I could. You have access to everything that's in the CRUD HTTP service, including, so everything that's on this is the same as it would be in the CRUD HTTP service. So you could say this URL, which at this point is http://localhost:3000/items equals this URL plus 1. And now URL is all of that plus, and then 1. So it's items 1. Probably want to do /1. Does that make sense? But you can do the same thing with all the functions. So like maybe most of these functions are the same. So I'm going to use everything the same, except maybe my delete function is different, because I don't want to actually delete anything. Maybe I use delete all over the place, but I don't actually want to delete anything. Maybe instead I want to do an update. So I'm going to change it to a put, and I'm going to like add a body. It's going to say
You don't have to do an override, Java has to override.
no. Yeah, it's automatic inheritance, and if you rewrite the same named method, it takes the child's method as priority. So if you create the same name method, or you create the same name variable anywhere, instance variable anywhere in the code of the child, it overrides whatever is in the parent.
Would you have been able to, let's say, you want to delete, but you wanted to also call the parents before you call yours?
That is harder to do.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. There may be some way to do that in TypeScript, but it's a little funky. In other languages, it's really easy. So in other languages, like Rails, you just call super inside the method. So you would call super with an ID, and that would give you back. It would call the delete function from your parent. But in TypeScript, there isn't that same concept. So I think what you end up having to do is calling you basically have to like which isn't particularly advantageous. Like, that's not great. Because it's just not very nice. And like if you rename the name of your parent function, it's not going to work, and all kinds of other things. But
yeah, so the best way would just be like use a different name for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know I have to go back from Friday's video and rewatch it, but
Yep.
Can you remind me, all the code on CRUD HTTP service, is that like a gem that you didn't write all that,
I did write all this, yeah.
but you did.
But it could be, like the way you're going to use it is very much as a gem, which is we could use NPM, like we could actually package this up and put it into NPM, just like you get gems from the Ruby gem community. You get packages like we use jQuery from NPM.
Right.
So we could take this and put it up into NPM, and you could pull it down and then reference it from there. But because it's code that I've written, you can literally just go copy it out of the GitLab and drop it into your file structure.
Yeah. So what I was understanding is that the benefits of having the intermediary class are so that you don't have to rewrite all this code.
Yes.
So conceptually, we're getting this code from somewhere and just
Correct.
creating an intermediary.
Correct.
Okay.
So you would copy and paste this code, but then never touch it again.
Okay.
And what you would do is create new, like, item HTTP service that extends from it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then you can call any of these functions from your item HTTP service. So, for example, the first one we call is where, and you don't technically need to know what's going on at that point. You know that when you call where, it's going to hit your index controller from your Rails action. It's going to give you back a list of the whatever it is that you're calling. It's going to give you back an array of them based on whatever the parameters are that you pass in. And so we understand that because it's the same as running it in the Rails console. But what's actually happening behind the scene, because I think it's useful for us to walk through and see it, not because you actually need it to be able to be successful getting the stuff done, is on line 9, what are we doing here? Yeah, go for it.
Alright, so you're taking the keys in your params, which
Yes.
is just everything.
So let's just do an example so we can see. So we do like name, hello, priority, 1000. Okay, so that's what params looks like. Right?
Yeah. So in this case, object.keys params, you can just look at that as an array of name and priority, the string name and priority, and then on that array you're going to map each one of those. So for example, name first, you're going to map that to the string name plus the equal sign, and then what the parameter, what it was in the object. So that's hello. So name equal hello, and then you'll have that, and then you're going to join. Okay, so you do that for each one of them.
Yep.
And then you turn all of that into one string, but you concatenate them with an and in between.
Yep.
The and symbol in between.
Yeah. Okay, so let's walk through this slowly. So object.keys on params gives us, there's a JavaScript function that exists that's available to us. It gives us back an array that has name and priority. Okay. So that's object.keys is going to give us back name, priority.
Can you give it back the keys?
It's going to give us back the keys. Then we're going to, so here, I'm going to break this up because it's a lot of things to read through at once. Keys. And this is a good, by the way, like if you start to get too complex and you don't know what's going on anymore, breaking your things up into smaller variables that are readable is a very useful way of moving forward. So that way we can do something like this. So on line 10, all we're doing is we're getting the keys. And on line 11, we're going to loop over the keys. We're going to call the map function on the keys. We're going to say for each key, I want to return the original key, which is either name or priority, plus an equal sign, plus whatever the parameters key is. So in our case, right, we're dropping in our parameters as name priority. And so if we do params name, what are we going to get back?
The value for the key, which is 1000.
Yeah, so hello, like I should say, yep. So we're going to get back hello. So we're going to have name equals hello. In other words, we're going to get back name equals hello. That makes sense? And then the second time through, on the second round of the map, we're going to get back priority equals 1000. Does that make sense? Okay.
What on line 12, the last part we have params key.
Yep.
Params is
In my
from line
mind,
9.
it should be saying params value.
It's from line. Params is from line 9.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
So params yeah, it's here. It's on line 9.
Yeah.
Params is our, really, it would be coming from our argument, right?
Right.
So params is this. Remember, this is an object notation in JavaScript.
Yeah.
It says that we can say params. So if we do params name, what do I get back?
The value of
The
name.
value, which is what in our case?
Alright, okay. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Now it makes
So,
sense.
so this is the same as doing this.
Yeah.
Right?
Gotcha.
It's just the other notation. This is where I talked about this a long time ago, but it has been a while. You can use either this notation or the string notation. And string notation is useful for when you don't know what it is. So in our case, it's a variable, right? So it's key. I don't know what it actually is, but I know it's going to be name or priority. And so I can say params key, and so this is going to be params name or params priority, and it's going to give me back whatever the value of that is. Cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I was just confused. Thank you.
Yep. All right, so then what we're going to end up with, so the mapped is going to be name equals hello, comma, priority equals 1000. See that? Okay. So then what we're going to do is use this other function that's given to us by JavaScript. It says when you have an array, you can join that array of things together as a string using a separator. Okay, so a lot of the time, you're going to join an array together with like a comma and a space, so you can like visualize and see it. In our case, we want to join the array together with an ampersand, and that is going to give us back so that means query string is going to look like makes sense?
Yeah.
Now, we went through that, and that is a useful exercise to be able to read through and understand what's happening with that. To be honest, I didn't know how this was actually working until we just did that exercise. What I did is I said, turn object into URL parameters. And I found a Stack Overflow article, and I copy and pasted the code that was there. Okay? So, like, just as a, you don't necessarily have to understand every bit and every piece of everything in code that you use, so long as it works. We just did that because that's a useful exercise to, like, break it back down. Okay? You should be able to get there and figure it out from a logic perspective, at least, but you're not always going to be able to do that, and that's okay. All right. Cool. So we get what's happening there. So now we have that string. So then what we're going to do is append it onto our URL. So http:// localhost 3000 items question mark, because that's our query strings go in, and then we pass in a query string, and that's our full URL. That then is going to be passed into this.get request. So we're going to go down here, full URL. And we have a try block. Does anyone remember what the try blocks are used for?
Yeah.
If there's an error that's thrown inside the try block, it will be caught, that catch error. And like here, you don't care what type of error, you catch all of them. Sometimes you can catch specific types of errors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in JavaScript, I don't know if there's a way to catch the specific error per se. Like I think you have to do if else's inside of the catch. There might be, and I just don't know about it. In Rails, there's lots of ways to say like just watch for this particular type of error and then come down. But yeah, so basically, if any error happens, if there's any JavaScript error that's thrown anywhere in this entire try block, it's going to move immediately into the catch block. Okay, and it's going to tell us what the error was, and then we can do something if we want to. In our case, we're trying to move you to an errors page. Well, in our case, we're not really doing anything. We're just constantly logging out the error. So, do very much. Okay. All right, but so we go into the try block. So you can imagine, like, you can ignore the try catch block stuff. Okay, in general, it's just saying if anything bad happens, do something else. Okay. But if we go inside of the try block, we say constant response equals await fetch full URL. What was full URL again?
Query string.
Yeah, the full URL. So it's URL plus the query string stuff, right? So localhost 3000 plus the query string, and we're calling this fetch function. What's the fetch function?
It's a HTTP call.
It's a HTTP call. It's given to us by JavaScript. We didn't write this. It's coming straight from JavaScript. Our method is get. Okay, so what method are we going to end up calling on the Rails side? Index, yep. Because we did a where, right? We have these query params. So we don't have a /ID. If we had a /ID, it would call the what with get? Show method. Mode is cores. You can ignore that. It's just talking about some cross-origin security stuff. You probably don't even need it, honestly, but we'll leave it there. There's some other options that we could pass in. Okay, so we're going to get back a response. The response has several things on it. One of them is status. Okay, the status is a code. These are agreed upon codes, so you can look at, if you're ever wondering, HTTP status codes. So it has one, and there they are, most of them. There's tons of them, and technically you can pass back anything that you want. It is useful to have some understanding of what these things do. Informational responses, so just like I'm doing some stuff, progress things, that type of stuff, you'll see they're generally in the hundreds. Almost never see 100 anything. Successful responses, 200 is the most common response, assuming that your things are working correctly. There are lots of other types of 200s. They're all good responses. So created, accepted, non-authoritative, no content. You'll see a 204 is what we send back when you delete something because it's no longer there. We're saying there's no content anymore. It's good. So we could do a 201 when you call create. We don't. We just give back 200, but we could. And it just gives you a little bit more information about what the server thinks happened in a very quick way. Redirects are in the 300s, and then error messages come back in the 400s. So 400, bad request, 422 is unprocessable entity. So you try to send parameters that were bad is usually what we use that for. Again, but whoever defined the server, they can send back whatever status code they want. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything. You are defining it if you run the server. Not found is a very frequently used 144. You'll see that. It just means you either can't find the page or you can't find the entity that you're looking for. 403 forbidden, 401 unauthorized. So the difference in the way that we end up using this is generally you get a 401 if you don't have a session at all, like you're not logged into our system. You get a 403 if you don't have the specific permission. You don't have the role. All right, so we get back to response. It has a status. We check to see if you have any bad things. If you have any bad things. What's that?
We skip 500.
We skip.
The 500 level?
I mean, we have a 500 or 503.
Oh, I thought you were just going to go through. Okay.
What's that?
Oh,
I see. Oh, I didn't talk about the 500s.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I know them, but
Yeah, I was reading the code. No, that's good. 500 you'll see all the time. Internal server error usually means that the server is broken. It's like real jacked up. Nobody has any. They didn't write the code in a way to deal with whatever the situation was, or the server literally doesn't even exist anymore. Like it's just off, or a migration didn't happen, or it's completely broken. 503 is another one that you'll see on our systems a lot. That usually means that we're doing a build. So we're switching from one server to another. So it's looking for the server, and it's like, well, it's kind of there, but the code's not there yet. So I'm going to send back a 503. So service unavailable. So those are a couple that you'll see a lot. 500s are the really bad. Like things are real jacked. Like this isn't an error that like you did something bad. It's like 500s are usually on the person who created the server. 400s are usually the request you're making is bad. Okay, 500s are usually the server is messed up. Okay, and that's where these codes become useful because they're very quick reference for, is this my fault, is this their fault? So we check a couple of the 500s, the one that we commonly see. We really probably should say like anything great. We should probably catch anything that's greater than 299, and say if any, or 399 probably, and say if any of that happens, then throw an error of whatever it is. But we're more specific. It's useful for us anyway. All right. So then we, assuming that we don't have any bad statuses and we end up in a 200, we're gonna say wait for the JSON response. What that's going to do is take whatever the payload was that they sent down from the server, and it's going to turn it into a real array or object or whatever the case may be that we can manipulate in JavaScript. Because when it comes down, it's in JSON. JSON is a string representation of JavaScript data types. Okay, so it's an array, but it's an array in quotes, or it's an object, but it's an object in quotes. And so we have to get it out of the string and into something that we can actually use as a variable in JavaScript. So it's what the response.json function is doing. That gives us back the data, and then we return that back up. Okay, so this gets returned from get request, and if we go back up to our where function, we're returning whatever get request gives us back, and then if we go back to our right, and that's being set to item data. Okay, you have to have those returns all the way up, and then we end up back.
This is I guess a weird question, but tangent. But if your app was complex enough, could you do a GET request? I guess that's getting closer to like what a server does, just saying HTML.
That's right. So that's, which, yes, you're kind of going backwards in some ways, right? But that is, we do that in our card creation. So you guys saw how now we do card creation. There's templates, and you click on things and fill out forms and whatever. The reason why that was interesting, oh, you might know. Yeah. The reason why that was interesting is that this card right here is HTML that was written by someone on our team. So if we go, they don't have cards. See, there's actually HTML that's being written here, and we pass it down. And then in JavaScript, you can call, the HTML piece is a little bit different. The HTML, you can, in Angular, it's different whether you're using JavaScript, Stencil, Angular, etc. to get the HTML to actually compile correctly. But there are ways in each of those to say, evaluate this as though it's raw HTML, put it into the page, and potentially compile any components that I have down there. We saw how to do this with Stencil, actually. So that H thing that we did that one time where I showed you like all it's doing with this return is turning it into this H function and passing in the code, that's how you would do it here. So you could pass down the information, and that's actually how we do it on the new stuff. You pass down the information with the name of the tag and the attributes of data that you want to put onto that. You call it H, and that turns it into real HTML that actually gets evaluated within your system. Okay. In JavaScript, too, there's a thing called eval. This is a scary function. So eval will turn any string that it's passed into actual executed JavaScript. Okay. So like if you imagined, if you got this entire class as a string, so like we actually, it's going to be hard to do because of escaping, but like imagine that you got the whole thing as a string here. You could call eval on it, and then it would run the code as raw JavaScript, as though you had just written it as a JavaScript file. Okay. So eval is a way to do that. H is a way to do HTML. So yes, you can totally send data as a string back and forth and turn it into things. Yep.
You just have like a single fetch request.
Yes, so you could have a single fetch request to get all of your code down if you wanted to, but there's not a lot of need for that because you could just easily, if it was an open endpoint, you could just add a script tag, which is basically what the script tag does. Right, so if you do script source, and we started with this when we used jQuery the first time, we did script source and then the CDN, HTTP, whatever, that is a GET request that's happening to a server, and it's sending down a string of JavaScript, and then it's calling eval on that. That's what's happening behind the scenes. That makes
I'm
sense.
just wondering. I guess. I mean, this is going way off the tangent in terms of what we're trying to talk. I'm just wondering why don't some companies do that, like for security reasons? Like, we don't want you to see what
Well,
our HTML. We don't want you to see some of.
it doesn't help because they'll still see it. Because
Okay.
right, because it has to. In the end, the browser has to have it to be able to run it,
Yeah.
because it all runs on your client computer, and so it's still coming down from the server, right? And every request that we make, we can see it.
Oh yeah, you can see what comes back.
Yeah, like see look, we can see every request that we're making, right, and what the feedback is, even if it's HTML. So like here is, so here's our cards that are showing up over here. You can see here's the front of that card. There's the actual HTML right here. There's nothing you can do about it. It's there. And you need to have it because you can inspect it and see it here because it's the actual code that's being run by the browser. So there's no security benefit of doing that. Outside potentially of, you could say, wait until they log in before you allow them to get all of the HTML down. At which point, yeah, there's a little more security because you have to log in before you can get it. But once they have it, they can copy paste and send it to whoever they want. So
Yeah. Are front and back just like attributes that are on the card?
yes. So they're just front and back, and then we write some code on the JavaScript side that says when I get back front, evaluate that HTML and put it on the page.
I earlier in the week was looking at putting stuff on the back of, like, because I heard you guys say, like, it's putting something on the back of a card,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh, you must just click the card and it goes to something else.
Yeah, that's right. So if you click, the back of the card.
I didn't know there was an attribute on the card.
Yep. So this is exactly what it looks like in our database. Right, there's a table called HTML feed cards, and it has these fields on it. And then when we're doing the same thing that you guys are doing, so we make a fetch request, and we get back all the cards that have an institution. So it's right here that have an institution ID of 71. Gives us back all those cards, which is an array of these cards, and then we loop over them and create each card one at a time using the attributes that are there. Does that make sense?
Like a lot of, like, looking at all this stuff makes like way more sense than it did the first week when you guys showed us, which
Yep.
despite the fact that I barely got CRUD running this morning, makes me feel better.
No, I mean, yeah, you guys are actually learning stuff really quickly, so you're doing great. Don't get frustrated. You're really like at the point where you can start creating stuff, which is really neat. So be excited.
Yes.
All right. Do we have any particular questions at the moment?
No.
All right. So goals for tomorrow afternoon are to have a working, which means persisting to your Rails app bingo board. If you can do all the pieces, all CRUD, create, read, update, delete, and it's actually based on your database, we're good. And then on Thursday, we'll do a presentation of what Daniel's been working on, which is very similar to what all you guys have been working on and includes some of your things, to the company. And then we will start working on our stencil projects. Next week, I'm going to get into a little bit of deployment. So what I would like you to do moving into Monday is, actually, yeah, let's stick with this all the way until next Tuesday, and we'll give you guys, so we'll start syllabi then. And the reason is I want to get you guys to do some real deployment. So we'll do Heroku deployment of the Rails app, and we'll do an S3 deployment of your front ends. And you'll be able to see a little bit of how GitLab works, how S3 works, how Heroku works, and how like really easy it is to do these things now if you just have a little bit of help to get there. Then you have real stuff that exists in the real world.
And then I can play bingo wherever I want.
You can play bingo wherever you want. Keep track of the fact that you're winning. Just have a leaderboard where everybody you play with gets put on the leaderboard, but yeah, you
I have
win.
a question. With the help of the team, I've been working on the back end
Yep.
for my bingo board. but it looks a lot more like what we did with earlier with the Rails app. That we didn't. I don't really have like a list of those async functions. Is that okay? Or?
It's okay. We in the next round of things, we really should be moving there though.
Okay.
And the reason is just that, and look, it's fine. Like you get away with doing the old way of doing it for a long time. It's just trying to get you guys into modern engineering practices.
Okay.
That's all.
Cool.
And they're not hard. You just have to do them a bunch of times, just like everything else.
Yeah.
So it's just a switch in mindset a little bit of what's going on. But yeah, and for the interest of getting it done, if that's what you're comfortable with at the moment, that's fine.
Well, I'm not really comfortable with
Okay.
any of this.
Yeah. If that's what you're more comfortable with at the moment because you see it working, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
But we will, on the next round, I'm going to start challenging you guys a little bit more to like actually use the way that this is set up.
Okay.
So,
Switch to weight.
Cool.
yeah, and again, not to say that you couldn't do it the other way. It's just that if you understand a weight in async when you go onto the job market, for example, people are going to be much more impressed by that than that you know how to do like a jQuery post or that you know how to use promises with a .then. Just because it's just new. It just shows that you're keeping up with the technology trends.
You mean
Yeah.
because I can do XML HTTP requests? That's not useful.
Yeah. It's not as useful.
But I feel like if you understand the .then, it's much easier to then understand the await.
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
await is the magic, the syntactic sugar
Yeah.
magic, versus the .then is the more. So going from
Yeah.
one to the other.
The .then is the more complex and the harder thing to understand.
So it's easier to go one way than the other.
Sure is.
I feel
Cool?
Yeah.
So tomorrow is Wednesday. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so tomorrow we'll do another review of where everybody's at, so it'll be very similar to what we did yesterday. Hopefully everybody's in a good state. Thursday we'll do a real presentation. And then so Thursday I'll probably have, I know he's done it a bunch of times already, but I'll have Nathaniel go back through Rails stuff again with you guys, so that you're getting another opportunity to see that side of things. And then on Friday, we'll work on getting a Heroku deployment and an S3 deployment going. And once we do that once, it should be like copy and paste to do any additional ones that you want to do.
Okay. What's the format for presenting the bingo leaderboard?
So when we do it on Thursday, we're going to do it. You guys can be as formal as you want to be. We're generally pretty informal place. I would have specific topic areas that you want to cover, like the feature sets that are interesting, like the trophy and that sort of thing. You've seen how office hours goes though, right?
Yeah.
It's very much just like, and that's really all you're doing. You're basically showing off the product that you've created. So you can just pull it up, run through the feature sets, show how it works, and then tell them that, hey, this is going to be out on a website soon, and we'll send you guys the link as soon as it's ready to go. And then hopefully like Monday or Tuesday we'll actually have a link to send it off.
Cool.
That'll give you guys feedback. You'll have to justify why you made things red and green or whatever, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we said we're gonna wait until next Tuesday to present, or
No, we'll present Thursday. We'll wait till next Tuesday to do the to start on syllabi.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, Tony. See you, man.
guys.
See you, Tony.